If we look at human development through a structural lens rather than an emotional one, there's a distinct moment where communication stops being an act of release and becomes an act of orientation. That moment is where week 10 begins. Up until this stage, your internal work has largely been about tracking what happens inside of you. You've been learning to recognize the signal, interpret the signal, and speak from a place that reflects understanding rather than impulse. That alone is a substantial achievement. But something else becomes possible when that internal sequence stabilizes. A new cognitive function becomes available: the capacity to recognize patterns across time. Pattern recognition is one of the highest forms of intelligence. It's the ability to step outside the immediacy of a moment and perceive how it fits within a larger constellation of experiences. This isn't intuition in a mystical sense. It's the intuition in the cognitive sense, the mind's ability to extract principles from lived events and apply them forward. The traditional language for this capacity is the third eye. But strip away the symbolism and what you're really working with is foresight. Your system's ability to view your life as a series of connected data points rather than isolated emotional episodes. Foresight becomes possible only when expression becomes coherent. Why? Because when the mind doesn't trust the voice, it won't reveal complex patterns. It'll withhold information to avoid overwhelm. It'll shrink your perceptual field to avoid instability. It'll keep you in the present moment long after you're ready to see beyond it. When your voice becomes a stable channel, the mind gains confidence that what it shows you can be articulated, processed, and integrated. Expression regulates perception. When you can speak clearly, you can see further. Week 10 focuses on this exact transition, the shift from reaction to recognition, from isolated insight to predictive intelligence, from understanding the present to anticipating the next step. Now, what do I mean by anticipate? Not to predict the future as a fixed outcome, but to understand the trajectory that you're creating through your repeated behaviors and choices, interpretations, and assumptions. Your future isn't an unknown void. It's a set of possibilities shaped by patterns that have been running beneath your awareness for years. Once you begin working at this level, you'll notice a striking phenomena. Most of what surprises you in your external life has been lived internally and rehearsed long before it happened. Your system already knew. It simply lacked the interpretive clarity to articulate it. Now you're building that clarity. Looking at the mechanics of it, the throat in the blueprint structure isn't simply the center of communication. It's the center of articulation. To articulate isn't merely to speak, it's to name correctly, to bring precision to what once lacked clarity. The throat doesn't generate truth, it refines it. The third eye, by contrast, deals in pattern. It observes how the same emotional logic repeats with different characters, different contexts, different timelines. It identifies the architecture beneath the variation. It notices the deeper principle that governs your behavior and the behavior of others. When these two centers work together, something profoundly important happens. You begin to speak from the intelligence of pattern and not the immediacy of experience. That means your words no longer describe what's happening, they describe why it's happening. And once you understand the why, you begin to intuit the what comes next. Foresight is the bridge between pattern and possibility. Foresight is the ability to infer future outcomes based on the structure of past behavior, not past events, past behavior. Events are circumstantial. Behavior is structural. People don't repeat events. They repeat patterns of meaning, interpretation, avoidance, pursuit, fear, and desire. Once you learn to see the patterns, you stop being confused by outcomes that once felt unpredictable. You start seeing hidden logic based on your own decisions, your emotional reactions, your relationships, your opportunities, and your obstacles. But there's a deeper implication. When you can see the pattern before you act, you gain the ability to interrupt it. And that's the moment that personal evolution accelerates dramatically. Interruption requires voice. Recognition requires vision. You're learning to hold both. From a cognitive perspective, week 10 marks the transition from reactive cognition to generative cognition. Reactive cognition responds to stimuli. Generative cognition creates the mental model before the stimuli arrive. It's proactive rather than reactive, strategic rather than defensive. You begin anticipating rather than coping. Most people never gain generative cognition because their internal world is too chaotic for pattern recognition to stabilize. Without internal order, without the ability to articulate your own experience, you can't see the structure beneath it. That's why all of the work leading up to week 10 matters. It wasn't about feelings, it was about giving your system enough coherence to begin studying itself. Self-study is the beginning of foresight. Pattern recognition isn't only about your behavior, it's about the behavior of life itself. Life repeats lessons with mathematical precision. If you don't understand them, they feel chaotic. Once you do, they feel almost predictable. The third eye is the part of your awareness that recognizes, I have lived this logic before. I know how this storyline develops. I can see the next 3 moves. I know what this choice will open or close. I can sense the architecture of this situation without needing every detail. It's not psychic ability, it's structural literacy. You become literate in the architecture of your own life. And once you have literacy, you gain authorship. Authorship means you're no longer navigating the world blind. You're not guessing what your next chapter will bring. You're constructing it with deliberate intention because you can finally see the scaffolding beneath your choices. In week 10, you're not simply using intuition. You're using an upgraded perceptual system. One capable of holding present experience, past pattern, and future possibility, all in a single thread of awareness. And this is the point where your evolution becomes exponential, because when you combine clear expression, which is the throat, with accurate pattern recognition, which is the third eye, your life stops unfolding behind your back. You stop being surprised by yourself. You stop misreading others. You stop interpreting your challenges as failures, and you begin reading them as feedback. This is the week where your perception starts moving ahead of your problems. Many people misunderstand foresight as imagining worst-case scenarios or projecting fears into the future. That's not foresight. That's trauma reenacting itself inside the mind. True foresight isn't a projection of fear. It organizes, it evaluates, it predicts based on structure rather than emotion. It sees the most coherent path forward and prepares the internal world to follow it. This requires precision and honesty. It requires the ability to track your own logic, not your fears. It requires the discipline to speak truthfully without collapsing into interpretation too soon. As you move through this week, you'll begin noticing subtle shifts in how you think. Your thoughts will feel more architectural. Your interpretations will feel more dimensional. Your voice will feel less protective and more directive. Your choices will feel less reactive and more strategic. That's the integration of two major capacities: the ability to articulate your truth and the ability to project that truth into the future with clarity. That combination produces something rare: a self that is both aware and intentional. A self that sees ahead. A self that no longer lives by accident. This is where week 10 begins.